"This isn't charity," the big man said, his voice low and steady, dropping a fistful of cash on the conveyor belt without breaking eye contact with the cashier. "It's the baby's right." The entire store went quiet. If you've ever stood at the edge of everything falling apart and still had to hold your child and pretend you weren't, then this story is for you. Drop the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Subscribe, stay until the end, and let's begin. The coins hit the counter one by one. Each small metallic clink landed like a verdict. Maria Lawson counted them with her fingertips, not her eyes, because her eyes were on her daughter, 7-month-old Lily, bundled into a second-hand carrier strapped across her chest, tiny fists curling and uncurling against the worn fabric of Maria's jacket. Lily had been whimpering for the last 20 minutes. Only broken sound that was worse than full crying because it meant she was too exhausted even to scream properly. It meant she had already given up expecting relief. Maria had not given up, not yet, but she was close. She pressed the last quarter down onto the pile and looked at the total on the register screen. $12.47. She had $11.30 in coins. She had checked her bank account that morning on her phone in the parking lot, standing in the cold with Lily pressed against her, and the number she saw was $2.14. That $2.14 had to last her until Friday, and today was Tuesday. The formula on the counter, the store brand one, not the name brand, the cheapest one available, cost $11.89. She was 59 cents short. The cashier, a teenager with a name tag that read Derek, looked at the coins with the particular kind of blankness that teenagers use when they want to communicate inconvenience without being technically rude. He had already counted the coins once. Now he counted them again slower, as if a second counting might produce different mathematics. "Ma'am," he said, "it's still not enough." "I know." Maria's voice was quiet. "I know it's not. I'm trying to think." Think of what she had nothing left to think of. Her wallet was empty. Her car, parked in the far corner of the lot because she didn't want to take up a close space, had a quarter tank of gas and no roadside assistance plan. Her phone had 11% battery. Her mother was 3 states away and had sent her a text 2 days ago that said, simply, "I told you this would happen." Maria had not responded. There was no one to call. There was no card to tap. There were $11.30 in coins and a baby who needed to eat. The line behind her had 4 people. She could feel them without turning around. She could feel the weight of their waiting, the particular pressure of people who are not in crisis watching someone who is people recalculating how long this is going to take and whether they should switch lanes. "Is there anything else I can do?" she asked Derek, not because she thought there was, but because she didn't know what else to say. Like, is there a store card or something? Or can I leave my name and come back with the difference I live close? I can be back in 20 minutes. Derek opened his mouth and closed it. He looked at his register like it might give him instructions. "I don't think we can, hold items like that. I'd have to ask my manager." "Can you ask your manager? She's on break." Maria nodded. She nodded slowly and carefully, the way you do when you are working very hard not to cry in public. Lily made the sound again, that small, exhausted, defeated sound, and Maria's hand moved automatically to her daughter's back, rubbing small circles through the carrier fabric. "It's okay," she thought, though she didn't say it out loud because she wasn't sure it was true. "It's okay, we're going to figure this out." She heard someone in line behind her exhale loudly. Not a sigh of sympathy, an impatient sigh, the kind that says, "Move along, some of us have places to be." Maria's shoulders tightened. She did not turn around. She would not turn around because if she turned around and saw an ordinary face attached to that sigh, a normal, comfortable, ordinary face, she thought something in her might crack open that she wouldn't be able to close again. She picked up one of the coins from the pile and set it back down. She didn't know why. There was nothing different to count. "Ma'am." Derek's voice had shifted slightly, gone a little softer in spite of himself. He was young, maybe 17, and Maria could see him struggling between his training and his conscience. "I'm really sorry. I can't override the total without manager approval." "Okay," she said. "Okay, I understand." She began to reach for the formula, not to buy it, but to slide it back across the counter, to return it to the space where it belonged, to walk away, and something inside her screamed so loud she almost heard it. Not a dramatic scream, a quiet, profound, desperate scream from the place in a person where all the held together things live. The place that had been holding it together for 9 months since David left, for 6 months since she lost the restaurant job, for 4 months since they cut her benefits on a technicality she still didn't fully understand, for 7 months since Lily was born beautiful and hungry and completely dependent on a woman who had nothing. She wrapped her fingers around the formula can. It was cold, store temperature cold, and it was the most important thing in the world. She stood there with her hand on the can and couldn't move. And that was when she heard the voice behind her, not Derek's voice, a different voice, deeper, slower, a voice that sounded like it had never needed to rush for anything in its life. How much is she short? Maria turned without thinking. He was not what she expected. But then she hadn't expected anything. She hadn't been expecting anyone to speak at all. Because in her experience, people in lines at grocery stores did not speak unless it was to complain, and they did not intervene unless it cost them nothing. This man was intervening, and it was clearly going to cost him something, and he did not appear to care about that at all. He was tall, genuinely tall, not just standing straight tall, with shoulders that had clearly been wide for a long time, and a jaw that had clearly been set the same way for just as long. He wore a leather vest over a dark shirt, and the vest had patches on it. And Maria, who had grown up in a small city and had seen enough to recognize what those patches meant, felt a reflex of fear move through her before she could stop it. Hell's Angels. The name on the vest patch read Ray. Below that, another patch she didn't read because she was busy trying to process the fact that this man, this large, tattooed, leather-vested man, who most people in this store were probably carefully not making eye contact with, was looking at Derek and waiting for an answer. "She's about 60 cents short," Derek said. He sounded genuinely uncertain, as though the situation had departed from any script he'd been given. Ray nodded once. He reached into the front pocket of his jeans, not a wallet, just his pocket, and produced a $5 bill. He placed it on the counter next to the pile of coins. He didn't hand it to Derek. He set it down flat, the way you set something down when the conversation is already over. "Ring it up," he said. "Sir, Ring it up." Derek rang it up. Maria stood completely still. Lily stirred against her chest, made the small sound again, and Maria's arm tightened around her daughter's body. She was watching this happen and simultaneously unable to believe it was happening, which created a strange doubling in her head, the part of her that was a mother who needed formula, and the part of her that was a person who had been taught all her life that nothing came without something owed. "You don't have to do that," she said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. I'm not asking for, I know you're not." He glanced at her, not unkindly, but not softly either. It was a direct look, the kind that didn't need anything from her. "It's not charity, it's the baby's right." The line behind them was completely silent. Someone coughed. That was the only sound. Derek handed Maria her change, $4.11, which she accepted with hands that she realized distantly were shaking, and slid the formula across the counter. Maria put it in her bag. She did it carefully, both hands like it was fragile. She turned to the man. "Ray." She didn't know what to say. There are moments in life when the thing that has happened is too large for the language you have available, and you stand in the gap between what you feel and what you can express, and you just look at the other person and hope they understand what you can't say. "Thank you," she managed. "I just thank you." He was already looking away. He had 3 items in his hand: a bottle of motor oil, a pack of gum, a candy bar, and he was setting them on the counter without any indication that the last 2 minutes had been anything other than ordinary. "Take care of your girl," he said, not looking at her. She walked out of the store. She made it to her car. She strapped Lily into the car seat, a process that took 3 minutes because her hands were shaking. Worse now. Not better now that the crisis had passed and her body had permission to react. And then she sat in the driver's seat and put her forehead against the steering wheel and shook. Not crying exactly, something below crying, something that didn't have a name. She sat there for a long time. Lily, who had received a few emergency drops of the water Maria kept in the car, had quieted. She was making small sounds now, the patient kind, the kind that said she trusted that something was coming. That trust was the most devastating thing Maria had ever experienced. That absolute infant trust in someone who had $11.30 and nothing lined up for Friday. She sat up. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. She started the car. She had formula, she had her daughter, she had $4.11. She drove home. The apartment was on the third floor of a building that had a broken elevator approximately 60% of the time. Today it was broken. Maria climbed the stairs with Lily in the carrier and the grocery bag on her arm and her purse over her shoulder, and she was breathing hard by the second floor landing, not from exertion but from the accumulated weight of the day pressing on her chest. The apartment was small. It was clean. Maria was meticulous about cleanliness in a way that was probably overcompensation, she knew that, but it was one of the few things she could fully control, and it was cold because she'd turned the heat down to 62 to save on the bill. She'd been wearing 2 sweaters inside for the past week. Lily's corner of the main room had a second-hand bassinet, a changing table Maria had found on the side of the road, and repainted herself in a small mobile with wooden animals that turned when you wound it up. She'd bought the mobile before everything fell apart, when she still thought everything was going to be fine. She made the formula at the kitchen counter, measuring carefully, checking twice. When she lifted Lily to feed her, her daughter latched with an intensity that made Maria's eyes sting. There is a particular kind of love that lives in watching a hungry baby finally eat. It is not a comfortable love. It is ferocious, and it is tinged with failure, even when you know the failure wasn't yours, even when you know you did everything you could. It doesn't matter. The love and the guilt are the same size. "I've got you," Maria told her. She said it out loud, not because Lily could understand, but because she needed to hear it herself. "I've always got you. I promise, Mom." Lily's small fist curled around Maria's finger. Maria looked at that fist, that tiny trusting fist, and she made the promise the only way she knew how. She made it the way a person makes a promise when they have no idea how they're going to keep it with everything she had. She put Lily down when she was finished, wound the mobile, watched the wooden animals turn. She sat on the edge of the second-hand couch and opened her phone and looked at her bank account again. $2.14. She would have $4.11 more once she found the energy to deposit the change, but she hadn't done it yet. She couldn't make herself do it yet. Friday was rent day. Not the full rent. She'd negotiated a partial payment with her landlord, Mr. Okafor, who was a decent man and had given her extensions twice already. But even the partial was going to wipe her out. She had a job interview Thursday morning at a call center, which she'd gotten through a temp agency, and the boss paid $13 an hour, and the hours were part-time, and she had no childcare. She stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring. It buzzed again 20 seconds later. Same number. She answered because when you are Maria Lawson and you have $2.14 in your account, you answer unknown numbers because they might be someone calling about the job application or the apartment assistance program she'd applied to 2 months ago, or any number of things that could change everything. "Hello, this Maria Lawson." The voice was familiar, though it took her a half second to place it because she wasn't expecting it. It was him, Ray. She sat up straighter as if he could see her. "Yes, this is Maria. I didn't give you my number." "Derek gave it to me." She blinked. "Derek, the cashier? He's my nephew. He called me after you left." A pause. "Said you looked like you were about to fall apart in the parking lot." Maria opened her mouth and then closed it. She thought about herself in the parking lot, forehead against the steering wheel, shaking. She thought about Derek watching her through the store window maybe, and calling someone. She felt simultaneously grateful and mortified. "I'm fine," she said, the automatic response, the one she'd been giving for 9 months. "I know." He said it the same way he'd said, "I know you're not asking," like it wasn't a dismissal, just an acknowledgement. "Listen, I'm not calling to check up on you. I got a question." "Okay." "You working?" She hesitated. "I have an interview Thursday." "Between now and Thursday, you working?" "No." Another pause. She heard something in the background on his end, the low rumble of something she couldn't identify. Maybe an engine, maybe a room full of voices. "My buddy runs the community center on Hendricks. You know it? I've driven past it. He's short-staffed, nothing glamorous, helping with the afternoon program, mostly administrative stuff, some childcare coverage. But it pays cash daily, and they have got a room where you can have your kid with you." Maria was quiet for a long moment. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. This time the pause was longer. She could hear him breathing. She got the impression he was choosing his words with some care, which surprised her. He hadn't struck her as someone who edited himself. Because I know what it looks like when someone's one bad hour away from losing everything, he said finally, and because I'd want someone to make the call if it was someone I loved. She looked across the apartment at the mobile still turning above Lily's bassinet, the wooden elephant, the wooden giraffe, the wooden bird. What's the name of your buddy at the community center? She asked. Gerald Marsh. Tell him Ray sent you. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll go in the morning. Good. He hung up. Maria sat with the phone in her lap and looked at her daughter, who was asleep now. Finally, with all the boneless certainty of a baby who has eaten and is warm and has no idea how close things have been. She did not know what was going to happen on Thursday, or Friday, or the week after that. But she had formula. She had a lead. She had a name. She had Gerald Marsh on Hendricks Avenue. And somehow, impossibly, she had a little more than $2.14 to hold on to. That night, after she'd eaten the last of the peanut butter on the last 2 slices of bread, after she'd turned the heat down to 60 to save 3 more degrees of Bill, after she'd laid Lily in the bassinet and sung the same 3 songs she always sang off-key quietly, the same songs her own mother had sung when things were different, she lay on the couch under 2 blankets and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the man in the leather vest. She thought about what he'd said. It's not charity, it's the baby's right. She had been told a lot of things in the last 9 months. She'd been told she should have planned better. She'd been told David leaving wasn't anyone's fault, which was a polite way of saying it was hers. She'd been told the system would help her if she just navigated it correctly, which turned out to be wrong. She'd been told she was strong, which people say to women in crisis because it's better than admitting that the system has failed them and no one knows how to fix it. Nobody had ever told her that her baby's need was a right. She wasn't sure she had a framework for that. She'd spent so long thinking of herself as someone who'd made mistakes, someone who needed to earn back the ground she'd lost, someone who was one humiliation away from the help she needed. She'd never really thought of Lily's hunger as something the world owed an answer to simply because Lily existed. She turned it over in her mind in the dark under the 2 blankets with the heat at 62 degrees. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe that framing was exactly wrong. Maybe Lily didn't need Maria to have done everything right. Maybe Lily didn't need to have been born into a stable situation or a 2-income household or a life with a plan. Maybe Lily just needed the way all babies needed, and that need was its own justification. Maria had been treating her daughter's survival like a problem she had to solve alone to prove she deserved to solve it. And some part of her, some stubborn, exhausted, terrified part, had believed that asking for help was a confession of fault, that every hand extended toward her was also a finger pointing. You should have done better. This is on you. Don't come back unless you've fixed it. She lay in the dark for a long time. She thought about Derek at the register, that teenager counting coins a second time with the specific blanknesses of someone who doesn't know what to do. She thought about him watching her walk to her car. She thought about him picking up his phone and calling his uncle, who was a man in a leather vest with a name patch that said Ray and a voice that didn't rush for anything. She thought about that, the chain of it, the kid who saw something, who knew someone, who made a call. She had not expected that. She had stopped expecting most things. She thought maybe that was the problem. Maybe the expecting was the thing that needed to be rebuilt first. Before the job, before the stability, before Friday's rent. Maybe the thing that needed fixing was the part of her that had decided quietly and without her full consent that no one was going to show up. Because someone had shown up. Unlikely. Tattooed, in a leather vest that scared the people in line behind them. But someone. She closed her eyes. She set her alarm for 6:45. In the morning, she was going to find Gerald Marsh on Hendricks Avenue. She was going to tell him that Ray sent her, and she was going to walk through whatever door opened because her daughter was asleep in the bassinet with a full stomach and the wooden animals were still. And Maria Lawson, who had not asked for help in 9 months, who had mistaken pride for dignity and isolation for strength, was finally quietly in the dark alone, beginning to understand the difference. The alarm had not gone off yet, but she was already awake. She was up before the alarm. That was the thing about being a mother with nothing. You didn't sleep through things. Your body stayed half awake, listening, calibrating, ready to respond before the crisis fully announced itself. Maria had not slept deeply in 7 months. She wasn't sure she remembered what deep sleep felt like. She remembered it the way you remember a city you visited once years ago. The general shape of it, but not the streets. She fed Lily at 5:40, changed her, wound the mobile. Then she sat at the small kitchen table with the last of the instant coffee she'd been rationing at 1 week cup a day, and she looked at the name she'd written on the back of a grocery receipt the night before. Gerald Marsh, Hendricks Avenue. Ray sent me. 3 things. That was what she had. She'd built less, with more and more, with less, and she was long past the point of waiting for certainty before she moved. She called the community center at 8:15 as soon as she figured they'd be open. The phone rang 4 times, and she was already rehearsing leaving a voicemail when someone picked up. Hendricks Community Center, this is Deb. Hi, I'm looking for Gerald Marsh. My name is Maria Lawson. I was a friend referred Ray Harlan. A beat of silence, not a cold silence, more like a recognition. Ray sent you, Deb repeated. The shift in her voice was subtle but real, like a door that had been slightly ajar, opening the rest of the way. Hold on, hun. Let me get Gerald. Maria held. She could hear the background noise of the place voices, something clattering, a child laughing, somewhere down a hallway. It sounded full. It sounded against all reason like somewhere she wanted to be. Gerald Marsh. His voice was warm and businesslike, at the same time the voice of a man who had learned to be both because the work required it. Mr. Marsh, my name is Maria Lawson. Ray Harlan told me to call. He said you might be short-staffed. Ray told you that, did he? It wasn't quite a question. How do you know Ray? She paused. She wasn't sure how to answer that. He paid for my baby's formula yesterday because I was 59 cents short, felt too raw to say to a stranger. He helped me out, she said, yesterday, and he thought maybe I could help you. Another beat. Gerald Marsh let it sit, which told her he was the kind of man who didn't rush to fill silence. Can you come in this morning, he asked. Bring your daughter. Deb said you have a baby. I do. She's 7 months. That's fine. We've got a setup for that. Come at 10. She was there at 9:50. The community center on Hendricks was a converted building. She could tell that much from the way the rooms didn't quite line up with each other, the way doorways had clearly been added and walls relocated. But it was clean and it was warm, and the moment she walked through the front door with Lily and the carrier, a woman at the front desk looked up and smiled like she'd been expecting her. Maria, I'm Deb. Gerald's in the back. Can I get you some coffee? Real coffee, not instant. Maria could smell it. Please, she said, and meant it more than she'd meant most things recently. Gerald Marsh was a black man in his late 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a handshake that meant something. He looked at Lily, first not in a cooing performative way, but with a direct assessing look, the way someone looks at a thing they want to understand. She eating okay? He asked. Maria blinked. Yes, now she is. He nodded as if that answered more than she'd said, which it probably did. Ray called me last night, he said. Told me a little. How much is a little? Enough. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. Tell me what you can do. She sat. She told him. She'd been a restaurant manager for 3 years before the place closed. Before that, waitress, bartender, office administrator. She could do accounts payable, she could manage schedules, she could handle difficult people in difficult moments, and she was good with kids because she'd been working around them her whole life and because she now had one permanently attached to her chest. Gerald listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at her over his glasses. 50 hours a week, I've got 12 staff doing the work of 20. The afternoon program, 3 to 7, is running on fumes. I need someone who can coordinate the volunteers, do the intake paperwork for new families, and make sure the food pantry shelving gets done before close. He paused. That sound manageable? Yes. Pay is $15 an hour. I can't do benefits right now, but I can do cash daily if that helps. It helped more than he knew. She didn't tell him that. She just nodded. And Lily, she asked. The nursery room is open during program hours. One of our regulars, Miss Patrice, runs it. She's been doing it for 11 years, and she's better at it than people with degrees. He said this with a quiet pride that told her Miss Patrice mattered to him. Your daughter will be 15 feet from you. Maria's throat tightened. She pressed her lips together and breathed through it. When can I start? This afternoon, Gerald said, if you're willing. She was willing. She spent her first 3 hours learning the filing system, Or rather, learning the beautiful disaster that was the filing system, which had been built over 14 years by 7 different volunteers with 7 different organizational philosophies, none of which spoke to each other. It was the kind of organized chaos that would have given a trained administrator hives. Maria found it strangely comforting because she was good at it. She could see the structure underneath the mess. She knew how to sort. She sorted. At 3 o'clock, the afternoon program began, and the building filled with children elementary school age, mostly some middle schoolers, a few teenagers who pretended they were there for reasons other than the fact that someone here cared about them. Maria watched from the intake desk where she was logging new family registrations and felt something happen inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt useful. It was not a dramatic feeling. It didn't fix anything. She still had $2.14 plus $4.11 change in her bank account. She still had rent due Friday. She still had David's name on her phone as a contact she hadn't called in 6 months because every time she looked at it, she felt like she'd failed some fundamental test of being a person. But she was doing something. She was in a place where people needed things done. She was needed. That was not nothing. At 4:30, Gerald appeared at the edge of the intake area. "How's it going?" "I found 11 registration folders from 2022 misfiled under current year," she said. "And I think someone was using the intake system to also track the food pantry inventory, which is why nothing reconciles." He looked at her for a moment. "You've been here 3 hours." "I work fast when I can see what's wrong." He almost smiled. "Deb," he called across the room, "I think she's going to fix the filing system." Deb, without looking up from her own work, said, "Lord, finally." At 5 o'clock, Maria took a break to feed Lily. Miss Patrice, a woman in her 60s with silver braids and the particular calm of someone who had held a lot of frightened babies, handed Lily over with a report. She slept for 40 minutes, took the bottle, well, been watching everything with those big eyes. Smart baby. "She is," Maria said. She held Lily against her shoulder and pressed her cheek against her daughter's head. She stood there for a moment, just breathing. "Ray Harlan sent you," Miss Patrice said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Miss Patrice made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "That man," she said with an affection that was also exasperation, "he does this." Maria looked up. "Does what?" "Finds people." Miss Patrice adjusted the blanket in the crib beside her. "Oh, brings them here. Usually doesn't say 2 words about it. Gerald gets a call, person shows up." She shook her head. "He helped Gerald get this building, you know, years ago, fundraised, showed up with a group of his people one Saturday, and they painted the whole exterior. Gerald tried to thank him, and Ray said," she paused, and Maria had the impression she was quoting exactly, "the neighborhood needed it, that's all." Maria looked down at her daughter. "What does he want?" she asked, not suspiciously, genuinely. "I mean, what does he get out of it?" Miss Patrice looked at her with the patient eyes of someone who has watched a lot of people ask the wrong question. "Nothing," she said simply. "He gets nothing. Some people are just built that way. Took me a while to believe it too." Maria nodded slowly. She went back to the intake desk. At 6:50, Gerald handed her an envelope. She opened it on the walk to her car, 350s, $150 for one day. She sat in the driver's seat and stared at the money. She had not held $150 in her hands since before Lily was born. She had lived on calculations and extensions and 1 week at a time negotiations in the quiet terror of looking at her bank account. And now she was holding 350s, and they felt unreal the way real things sometimes feel when you have gone long enough without them. She put the money in her wallet. She started the car. She drove to the grocery store, different grocery store, not the one from yesterday. She wasn't ready for that yet, and she bought formula 2 days worth of meals, milk, eggs, bread, and a small bag of apples because Lily would be starting soft food soon, and Maria wanted to be ready. She stood at the checkout and swiped her debit card, and the machine approved it, and she picked up her bags and walked out, and it was the most ordinary transaction in the world, and she had to stop outside the door and take 3 long breaths before she could walk to her car. Ordinary. She wanted ordinary so badly it had become a kind of hunger. She was almost home when her phone rang. Same unknown number as last night. She answered it before the second ring. "How'd it go?" Ray's voice. "Good," she said. "Really good, actually. Gerald he's a good person." "Yeah, he is. He paid me cash today." A pause. "Good. I wanted to tell you I'm going to pay you back. The formula, the $5. I'll bring it by the I don't know where to bring it. Don't. Ray Maria. The way he said her name wasn't commanding, it was just final. You want to pay something back, you pay it forward. That's how this works. You understand? She was quiet for a moment. She thought about Miss Patrice saying he finds people. She thought about a Saturday when a group of men in leather vests showed up and painted an entire building, and Ray said the neighborhood needed it. I understand, she said. Good. Get some sleep. He hung up. She got home. She climbed the stairs, the elevator was still broken, and she got Lily bathed and fed and down, and she made herself dinner. A real dinner with eggs and toast, and she sat at the table and ate it, and it tasted like something worth tasting. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Derek from the store. I know this is weird. I just wanted to make sure you and your baby were okay. My uncle told me not to text you, but I figured you probably wanted to know somebody was thinking about you. Sorry if this is too much. She stared at the text. Derek, the teenager with the name tag, who had watched her walk to her car and called his uncle and started this whole chain. She typed back, "Thank you, Derek. We're okay. You did a good thing." 3 dots appeared. Then cool. Take care of your baby. She put her phone down. She looked at the ceiling. There was a feeling working its way up through her chest that she didn't quite have a word for. It wasn't happiness exactly. It wasn't relief, though it was partly that. It was something older and more complicated. It was the feeling of having been seen, of having been in the worst moment, coins on a counter, baby crying 59 cents short of something her child needed, and having been seen not as a problem or an inconvenience or an embarrassment, but as a person, as a mother, as someone whose situation mattered. She had spent 9 months invisible. Invisible at the unemployment office, invisible in the benefits review, invisible in the apartment with the broken elevator and the heat turned to 62. Invisible in the particular way that struggling people become invisible, not because no one can see them, but because looking at them requires acknowledging something uncomfortable, and most people given the choice choose the other direction. Ray Harlan had not looked the other way. Derek had not looked the other way. Gerald Marsh had said, "Can you come in this morning?" and meant it. She was not fixed. Nothing was fixed. Thursday's interview was still Thursday's interview. Friday's rent was still Friday's rent. The elevator would probably still be broken tomorrow. The heat would still be at 62, because even with today's pay, she needed to be careful, needed to stretch every dollar until it was transparent. But she was not invisible. She carried that thought to bed with her, wrapped it around herself like a third blanket, and she slept not deeply. She was still a mother, still calibrating, but more than she had in a long time. She was back at Hendricks the next morning at 8:30. Gerald had not asked her to come in the morning. The afternoon program didn't start until 3. But she'd woken up thinking about the filing system, and she'd lain there for 40 minutes telling herself she should wait, and then she'd gotten up, fed. Lily gotten them both dressed and driven over. Deb looked up when she came through the door, raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't done with the 2022 folders," Maria said. Deb pointed at the coffee machine. "Help yourself." She worked all morning. She reorganized 3 years of intake records, rebuilt the cross-reference between family registrations and food pantry usage, and found an error in the volunteer hours log that had been underpaying 2 part-time staff members for 4 months. She printed the discrepancy report and left it on Gerald's desk with a note. He came out of his office 20 minutes later, looking at the paper with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How much are they owed?" he asked. "Combined about $840. He took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes. "I'm going to have to move some things around." "I know, but they did the work." He looked at her. "Yes, they did." He put his glasses back on. "You've been here 2 days. Is that a problem?" "No," he said. "It's the opposite of a problem." He paused. "How's the interview Thursday?" She'd mentioned it the day before briefly. She was surprised he remembered. "It's a call center, 13 an hour, part-time." "You going to take it if they offer?" She hesitated. "I was going to. I need the stability." "The hours." "What if I offered you 35 hours a week?" he said. "Same rate. I'd need to restructure, but after what I'm looking at in this file," he held up the discrepancy report, "I think I can justify it to the board." Maria went very still. Are you serious? I don't make offers I'm not serious about. She looked at him. She thought about the call center. Fluorescent lights, headsets a cubicle, no Lily a commute. She thought about this building which smelled like old coffee and permanence and people who kept showing up. I'll cancel the interview, she said. Gerald nodded once as if that was settled, which apparently it was. Talk to Deb about the paperwork. He went back into his office. Maria stood in the middle of the room and felt the ground under her feet, really felt it for the first time in 9 months. Not solid, she was not so far gone into hope that she confused a 35-hour offer with solid ground. But something that held weight. She went to find Deb. What she did not know, what she would not know until much later. Until a Tuesday evening 6 weeks from now, when Gerald would tell her over terrible coffee in his cluttered office, was that Ray Harlan had called Gerald a second time the night after her first day. She would not know that Ray had said, "She's the real thing, Gerald. Don't let that one slip through the cracks." She would not know that Gerald, who had run this center for 14 years and had learned to trust Ray's instincts about people the way you learn to trust a good compass, had gone into his office that night and started moving budget lines around before Maria had even driven home. She would not know any of that yet. What she knew was this: it was Wednesday morning. She had formula. She had a job. She had Lily asleep 15 feet away in the nursery with Miss Patrice humming something low and steady. And she had, for the first time in a very long time, something that felt cautiously, terrifyingly, quietly like a plan. The Thursday interview, the one she canceled, would have been at 9 in the morning. She would have driven across town, found parking, sat in a plastic chair, answered questions about her customer service experience, and come home to wait for a call that probably wouldn't come until the following week. She knew this because she had done versions of this 8 times in the last 4 months. The process was familiar in the way that failure becomes familiar when you've spent enough time inside it. She did not go to the call center. Instead, she was at Hendricks at 8:30, the filing finished from the day before a new project already identified, the volunteer scheduling system, which ran on a spreadsheet so outdated it predated the current staff entirely. She was building something. She could feel it the way you feel a structure coming together piece by piece, the way the shape of it starts to appear before it's finished. And somewhere across the city, Ray Harlan was having coffee alone, not thinking about her, not checking in, not waiting for acknowledgement, just living his life the same way he'd lived it before her coins hit the counter, which was she was beginning to understand exactly the point. 3 weeks in Maria stopped counting the days. That was how she knew something had shifted. In the first 9 months of surviving alone, she had counted everything days until the next paycheck, days until the rent was due, days since David left, days since she'd eaten a full meal without calculating what it cost. Counting had been her way of holding the edges of her life together, keeping track of how close she was to the next cliff. She didn't stop counting because things were easy. They weren't easy. The elevator was still broken half the time. The heat was still lower than it should be. There were still mornings when she checked her bank account and felt the old, cold fear move through her like a draft under a door. But the counting had changed character. Now she was counting forward instead of backward. Days until Lily's 8-month checkup, which she could actually afford now because Gerald had quietly connected her with a sliding scale clinic 2 blocks from the center. Days until the end of the month when she'd have enough saved to pay Mr. Okafor in full for the first time since April. Counting forward was a different thing entirely. She was at the intake desk on a Thursday morning when the door opened and a woman came in with 2 kids, a boy who looked about 8, a girl maybe 5, and a look on her face that Maria recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting. The particular set of someone who has been holding it together in public for so long, they've forgotten there's another way to hold themselves. "Hi," Maria said. She kept her voice even, not too soft. Soft could tip someone over the edge, but warm enough to mean something. "Come on in. Can I get you some coffee?" The woman, her name turned out to be Sandra Price, single mother, recently evicted from an apartment in the East Side after her landlord sold the building, sat down in the chair across from the intake desk and answered Maria's questions in a low, careful voice. The kids sat beside her, the boy with his arm around the girl, not fidgeting, not making noise the way children sit when they have learned that being invisible is a survival skill. Maria looked at those kids and felt something move through her chest. Not pity, she'd had enough of pity from the other direction to know it didn't help. Something more like recognition and resolve. She got Sandra through the intake. She found her a slot at the food pantry for that afternoon. She called Gerald's contact at the Emergency Housing Assistance Office and got Sandra an appointment for Friday morning. She wrote the address down in her best handwriting and circled it twice. This Friday at 9, she told Sandra, ask for Karen. Tell her Gerald Marsh sent you. She'll make sure you're seen that day. Sandra looked at the paper. She looked at Maria. Her eyes were doing the thing that Maria's had done 3 weeks ago in the parking lot, that particular overflow that happens when kindness arrives at the wrong time, which is to say the right time. I don't know how to, Sandra started. You don't have to, Maria said. And then, because she knew exactly what the other woman needed to hear and exactly why she needed to hear it, your kids' need is their right. You're doing the right thing by being here. She watched those words land. She watched Sandra's shoulders drop 2 inches. The boy looked up at Maria. Is there food here today? He asked. Not aggressively, just directly the way hungry children ask things when they've decided they're tired of pretending they're not hungry. Yes, Maria said. There's food today, and there'll be food here tomorrow. She caught Deb's eye across the room. Deb was already moving toward the pantry. After Sandra and her kids were settled, Maria sat for a moment and breathed. She was still getting used to this part, the part where she had something to give. It didn't feel natural yet. It felt like wearing new shoes, but she could feel it breaking in. She called Ray that evening. She'd started doing that, calling him, not every day, but every few days. He usually answered on the 3rd ring and talked for approximately 4 minutes before wrapping up, which she had come to think of as a Ray Harlan conversation, efficient, direct, oddly complete. There was a woman today, she told him, evicted, 2 kids. I got her the housing appointment and the pantry slot. Good. I used your line, the one about the baby's right. I told her kids' need was their right. A pause. She could hear the background rumble that was always there on his end engine or crowd she still hadn't figured out which. How'd it land? Like a rock in still water. He was quiet for a moment. You know where that line came from? No. My mother, he said. She used to say it about me. When I was little and we had nothing and she was too proud to go to the food bank. He paused. Took her 3 winters to say it to herself the right way. Maria didn't say anything. She held the phone and let that sit between them. She figure it out eventually, she asked. She did. Good. Yeah, a beat. How's Lily? Trying to pull herself up behind things. She grabbed the edge of the coffee table today and stood up for about 2 seconds. Ray made a sound that was almost not quite, but almost a laugh. Watch your shelves. I know. He hung up 4 minutes after he'd answered. She sat with the phone in her lap and thought about a woman she'd never met holding a small boy in a cold apartment, telling herself that his hunger was not a character flaw, telling herself that needing was not the same as failing. She thought about how long that took. 3 winters. She thought about the coins on the counter. She thought about 59 cents. She wondered sometimes, not with regret. She was past regret mostly, but with genuine curiosity. What would have happened if she'd gone to a different checkout lane? If Ray had been running late or early or had gone to a different store? If Derek hadn't had an uncle who answered his phone? The narrowness of it scared her still. How close everything had been to just continuing to fall. She put her phone down and went to check on Lily. The following Tuesday, something happened that Maria was not prepared for. She was at the intake desk when Gerald called her into his office. He had 2 people with him, a man and a woman Maria didn't know, both in their 40s, both with the particular alertness of people who have come to see something specific. Maria, Gerald said. This is Karen Howell and David Park. They run the Families Forward initiative out of the city's social services office. She shook hands, sat down. We've heard about the work you've been doing on intake, Corinne said. Gerald sent us your reorganization report, the cross-referencing system you built. It was just a cleanup, Maria said. The structure was already there, it reduced our duplicate registration problem by 60%, Gerald said flatly. In 3 weeks. Maria looked at him. He hadn't told her that. We're piloting a new intake coordination model across 6 community sites, David said. We need someone to design the system and train the site coordinators. It would be a contract position, 12 weeks with potential to extend. He paused. Gerald thinks you are the right person. The room was very quiet. Maria thought in fast succession, this is not real. This is too fast. I have been here 3 weeks. I don't have a degree in social services. I have never designed a system for 6 sites. I don't know what I'm doing. I barely know what I'm doing here. What does the position pay? She asked. David told her. It was nearly double what Gerald was paying her. She looked at Gerald. He looked back at her with the same expression he'd had when he showed her the discrepancy report, not urging her, not performing confidence on her behalf, just steady, waiting. I'd need to keep my hours here, she said. I can't leave Gerald short. We're not asking you to leave, Corinne said. It's contract work. Evenings and weekends for the design phase, then the training would be daytime over 2 weeks. I have a baby. We have a flexible schedule. She looked at David. She looked at Corinne. She looked at Gerald, who was looking at his coffee cup with the studied neutrality of a man who has arranged something and does not want credit for arranging it. Can I have until Friday to decide? She asked. Of course, Corinne said. They left. Maria sat across from Gerald and waited. He looked up from his coffee cup. Before you ask, he said, I did. Yes, I sent them your report. And yes, I recommended you. And no, you don't need a degree. You need what you have, which is the ability to see what's broken and fix it without being asked. I've been here 3 weeks, Gerald. I know how long you have been here. She sat with that. What if I get it wrong? The training, the system. What if I design something that doesn't work at 6 sites the way it works here? Gerald looked at her with an expression that was not impatient, but was close to it in the way that patience can become a form of gentle confrontation. Maria, you came in here with $11 and change and reorganized 14 years of records in a week. You found an $800 payroll error no one else caught. You handled Sandra Price's intake in 30 minutes and then got her an appointment I couldn't have gotten her until next month. He paused. You're asking me if you can do this. I'm telling you the question doesn't make sense. She looked at her hands. She thought about what it meant that she was still doing this, still reflexively, doubting, still internally flinching from the forward motion, still looking for the catch. She'd thought the counting forward thing meant she was past it. She was not past it. It was just slower now, the doubt. It took longer to arrive. I'll call them Friday, she said. Good. He picked up his coffee. Close the door on your way out. I have a board call in 10 minutes. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway and breathed. Deb appeared at her elbow with a printout. New family coming in at 2. 3 kids under 6. Dad just got laid off. She paused. You okay? I'm okay. You sure? Because you look like someone just told you the building was on fire. Gerald recommended me for a contract with the city. Deb stared at her. What kind of contract? Maria told her. Deb put the printout down. She pulled Maria into a hug, the sudden firm kind, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Maria stood in it and felt something crack open that had been sealed for a long time, not painfully the way things crack when they break, more like the way things crack when the pressure finally stops. You deserve it, Deb said with the conviction of someone who has decided something and is not interested in being argued with. I've been here 3 weeks. Honey, you've been doing this your whole life. This is just the first time somebody put a room around it. Maria pulled back and blinked hard and did not cry because she was at work and there was a family coming in at 2. But it was close. She called Ray that night. He answered on the 3rd ring. Gerald recommended me for a city contract, she said without preamble. Designing an intake system for 6 community sites. 12 weeks. It pays. She told him the number. Silence. Ray. I heard you. His voice had the same quality it always did, flat and steady, but she'd been listening to it long enough now to hear things underneath. Right now, underneath the flatness, there was something that sounded like satisfaction. Not pride exactly, deeper than pride. I haven't said yes yet, she said. Why not? Because it scares me. Good, he said immediately. She frowned. Good. Things that don't scare you aren't worth doing. Things that scare you mean you care about getting them right. A pause. You going to let it stop you? She thought about Sandra Price sitting in the intake chair with her kids and that look. She thought about the boy who'd asked if there was food today, and she'd said yes. She thought about the feeling, not comfortable yet, but growing, of having something to give. No, she said. Then why are we having this conversation? She almost laughed. Almost. Because I needed to hear you say it. A beat. Say what? That I can do it. The pause this time was longer. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than as she'd heard it, which on Ray Harlan meant it carried more weight, not less. Maria, he said, I knew you could do it the day you stood at that register and didn't fall apart. Some people, the pressure breaks them. Some people, it just shows you what they're made of. Another pause. I saw what you're made of. She didn't say anything for a long moment. 59 cents, she said finally. 59 cents, he agreed. She called Karen Howell on Thursday, not Friday. She told her yes. She stayed up until 1 in the morning reading everything she could find about multi-site coordination models and intake system designs, sitting at her kitchen table with Lily asleep in the next room, making notes in the margins of printed pages with a pen that was almost out of ink. She was not afraid. Or rather, she was afraid, and she was doing it anyway, which she was beginning to understand was the only definition of courage that actually applied to her life. She was 3 pages into her preliminary notes when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She almost didn't read it. Then she did. It was from David. The message was 4 words. One problem. Call me. She stared at the screen. It was 1:12 in the morning. She called. He answered immediately, which meant he'd been awake, which meant the problem was not small. What happened? She asked. The board approved of the pilot, he said, but they want the lead coordinator to have a formal social services credential or equivalent documented experience. HR policy. He paused. I'm sorry, Maria. I thought we had more flexibility on the qualification language than we do. She sat very still. 1:12 in the morning. Notes on the table. Pen almost out of ink. How documented, she said. How at least 3 professional references with direct knowledge of program coordination or systems design, or a credential from an accredited program. He paused again. I'm sorry, I should have confirmed the HR requirements before we approached you. She sat there and felt the familiar cold move through her, the one she'd been outrunning. Can I have until Monday? She asked. Her voice was steady. She did not know how her voice was steady, but it was. Yes, of course. She hung up. She sat at the kitchen table at 1:13 in the morning and looked at her notes. 3 professional references with direct knowledge of program coordination or systems design. She had been at Hendricks Community Center for 3 weeks. Before that, she had managed a restaurant. Before that, she had been a bartender, a waitress, and office admin. She had never had a title that included the words program or coordination or systems. She thought about Gerald. He could be one. He had seen exactly what she'd done, and he'd sent them her work. He would write the reference without being asked twice. She thought about the restaurant where she'd worked before Lily. The manager there had liked her, but she'd left without much notice when the place closed, messy, ending not bad but not clean. She needed 3. She had one certain one, maybe. She put her head in her hands, and then she sat up. She picked up her phone and she found the contact she almost never opened. She looked at it for a long time. She had not called this number in 4 months. She dialed before she could talk herself out of it. It rang twice. Maria, his voice, David's voice, her David Lily's father was surprised and careful in equal measure. It's 1 in the morning. I know, she said. I know I need something from you. A pause. Are you okay? Is Lily? Lily's fine. We're both fine. She took a breath. I need a professional reference, and I need you to tell the truth. The silence that followed was the longest 15 seconds of her recent life. What kind of reference? He asked. Program coordination, systems. You worked with me at the restaurant for 2 years. You saw how I ran the floor, managed the schedules, handled the supplier accounts. She paused. You know what I can do? Another silence. Maria, he said, and she heard something in his voice she hadn't expected. Not guilt exactly, more like regret, and behind the regret, something that wanted to make good. Yeah, he said quietly. I know what you can do. Send me the form. She exhaled. Thank you, she said. I'm sorry, he said, about everything. I'm sorry. She'd waited 9 months for that. She'd imagined in the long dark hours of the apartment what it would feel like to hear it. She'd thought it would feel like something enormous, like a door opening or a weight lifting or the particular relief of something finally named. It felt like less than that, and strangely like more. Not the grand moment she'd constructed in her head, just a man on a phone at 1 in the morning saying he was sorry and meaning it and her believing him. Send me your number, she said. Karen Howell will call you. She hung up. She had Gerald. She had David. She needed one more. She sat and thought, and then slowly, the way an answer arrives when you've been asking the wrong question, and finally stopped, she thought of someone. She picked up her phone one more time. She texted Ray Harlan. "Are you awake?" Three dots appeared almost instantly. "Yeah," she typed. "I need to ask you something. Can we talk tomorrow morning?" His response took 30 seconds. "I'll call you at 7. She put her phone down. She looked at her notes. She picked up the almost empty pen and kept writing. At 1:40 in the morning, with Lily asleep 15 feet away and 3 weeks of improbable forward motion behind her and a phone call at 7 ahead of her, Maria Lawson was not counting down. She was building. Ray called at 7 on the dot. She was already up. She'd fed Lily-made coffee and was sitting at the kitchen table with her notes from the night before spread in front of her when the phone rang. She answered before it finished the first ring. "Talk," he said. No greeting. That was Ray. "The city contract has a qualification requirement," she said. 3 professional references with direct knowledge of program coordination or systems design. "I have Gerald. I have David Lily's father. He worked with me at the restaurant." She paused. "I need one more." Silence. "And you're calling me at 7 in the morning," he said slowly, because you've watched me work for 3 weeks. Because you talked to Gerald. Because you know what I've done at Hendrix." She stopped. Then, because she had learned that Ray respected directness above almost everything else, and because I trust you to tell the truth, even if the truth isn't enough. The silence this time was different. Not the silence of someone deciding. The silence of someone who had already decided and was just finding the right door to walk through. "I've never written a professional reference," he said. "I know. I don't have a title that means anything to a city HR department." "I know that too." "So why Because you see people clearly," she said, "and because whoever reads it will feel that, even if your title is just Ray." Another pause, longer. "Send me the form," he said. "I'll have it back to you by noon." She exhaled so hard she had to pull the phone from her ear. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. If you don't get this, it's because the system's broken, not because you weren't ready." A beat. "But you're going to get it." He hung up. She sent the form to 3 people, and then she made herself put the phone down and go about her morning, because sitting and watching her email refresh was not something she could afford to do with her sanity. Gerald's reference came back in 40 minutes. It was 2 pages long, single-spaced, and it used words like exceptional analytical instinct, in self-directed systems, thinking, and the most productive 3 weeks of hiring I have made in 14 years of running this center. She read it twice, standing at the kitchen counter, and had to remind herself to breathe. David's came in by 10. It was shorter, 1 page, measured professional in the way that someone writes who is choosing every word carefully, because they know they owe something and want to pay it correctly. He described her management of the restaurant's front-of-house operations, her scheduling system, her supplier coordination. He described her, she realized, accurately. Not generously distorted, just accurately, which was in its way a more meaningful thing. Ray's came in at 11:53, 7 minutes before noon. She opened it expecting something rough around the edges, direct, honest, but maybe thin on the formal language that HR departments understood. She was prepared to love it anyway. She was not prepared for what it actually was. It was 1 page. The language was not corporate, but it was exact in the way that a level is exact, not approximate, not angled, but precisely, undeniably true. He had written about watching her at the intake desk, about the way she handled Sandra Price, about the filing system and the payroll error. He had written, "I have known a lot of people in hard situations. Most of them, the hard situation defines them. Maria Lawson is not defined by it. She defines what comes next. That's not a quality you can train. It's a quality you recognize when you see it. I am recognizing it here." She read it 3 times, then she forwarded all 3 references to Karen Howell with a note that said, "Please find the requested references attached. I look forward to your decision. Professional, clean." She sent it and closed her laptop and picked up Lily and held her daughter against her chest and stood in the kitchen and let herself feel for exactly 90 seconds everything she'd been holding at a distance since 1 in the morning. Hope. Real hope, not the desperate rationing kind, not the 1 more day kind. The kind that has weight to it. The kind that knows it might not work out and is going ahead anyway. Then she put Lily in the carrier and went to Hendrix. Corinne called on Friday afternoon. Maria was in the middle of helping a new volunteer understand the intake protocol when her phone buzzed. She saw the number. She held up one finger to the volunteer 1 second and stepped to the edge of the room. "Corinne," she said, "Maria." The references were exceptional. A pause that lasted approximately 1,000 years. "We'd like to move forward. Can you come in Monday to sign the contract?" She pressed her free hand flat against the wall beside her, just to have something solid. "Yes," she said, "Monday is fine." She went back to the volunteer who was looking at her with mild concern. "You okay?" the volunteer asked. A young woman, maybe 22, new to the center. "I just got a job," Maria said. The young woman broke into a smile. "Congratulations." "Thank you." She picked up the intake folder. "Okay, so when a new family comes in, the first thing you do," she kept working. Gerald found out through Deb, which meant he found out approximately 4 minutes after Maria hung up with Corinne. He appeared at the intake desk with his coffee and said simply, "Good," and walked back to his office. She told Miss Patrice at the end of the day when she picked up Lily from the nursery. Miss Patrice put her hands on Maria's face, both hands the way an older woman who has seen enough of life does when she wants to make sure you're paying attention, and said, I told you from the first week." "You didn't tell me anything," Maria said, laughing slightly. "I told Gerald. Same thing." She released Maria's face. "You take that baby home and celebrate with something good, even if it's just ice cream." It was ice cream. 1 pint of the cheap brand Etain with a spoon at the kitchen table after Lily was asleep with the overhead light on and the window cracked because the apartment was finally warm enough to crack a window. It was the best thing she'd eaten in a year. She was almost entirely certain that was not the ice cream's doing. She called her mother. She had not called her mother since the text "I told you this would happen" that she'd never answered. 7 weeks of silence, long enough that she'd half decided the distance was permanent, or at least would need to be managed for a very long time. The phone rang 4 times. Maria was composing a voicemail in her head when her mother picked up. "Maria," her mother's voice was careful, not cold, careful, which was different. "Hi, Mom." Silence. "I have some news," Maria said. She told her. All of it, not the worst of it, not the coins, not the 59 cents. She was not ready for that part yet. Maybe not ever with her mother, but the job at Hendricks, the contract with the city Lily's development, the sliding scale clinic, the apartment that was finally warm. Her mother listened. She was quiet in the way that people are quiet when they are revising something they had decided. "You're all right," her mother said finally. Not a question, more like she was confirming it to herself. "We're all right." Another pause. "I shouldn't have sent that text." Maria had prepared herself for this not to happen. She'd been fine with it not happening. She hadn't known until just this moment that she'd been carrying the weight of waiting for it. "No," she said, "you shouldn't have." "I was scared," her mother said. "When you're scared for someone and you can't help them, sometimes it comes out mean. That's not an excuse. I know, Mom." They talked for 32 minutes. It was not a healing conversation. One conversation doesn't heal that kind of fracture, and Maria knew that, and she was not looking for magic. It was a beginning, a reopening, the kind of conversation that says we're still here. Let's see what this looks like now. When she hung up, she sat for a while and thought about Ray's line again. 3 winters. His mother figuring out that her child's need was a right. Some things took time. The important thing was that they happened. She went to bed and slept deeply for the first time since she couldn't remember when. Monday morning, she signed the contract. The 12 weeks that followed were the hardest and most clarifying of her life. She was at Hendricks 4 days a week, still running the afternoon intake. Gerald had restructured her role to make it work, which required a board conversation she was not present for, but which Deb told her afterward had involved Gerald being, in Deb's words, extremely Gerald at anyone who questioned it. On the other days, she was meeting with the coordinators at the 5 other pilot sites, learning each building's existing systems, mapping the overlaps and the gaps, building a unified framework that could live across all of them without erasing what was working in any of them. It was complicated. It was also exactly what she was built for, and she understood that now in a way she hadn't 3 months ago. She had a mind that saw structure in disorder. She had a tolerance for complexity that came from having survived it personally, and she had something that no amount of credential could give you, which was the knowledge of exactly what it felt like to sit in an intake chair. She did not forget that. She built a system around it. In week 4, she went to the second pilot site, a center in the north end of the city, and sat with their intake coordinator, a woman named Phyllis, who had been doing the job for 9 years with a system made of legal pads and memory. "I don't see why we need to change what's working," Phyllis said, not hostilely, just honestly. "I don't want to change what's working," Maria said. "I want to understand what's working and make sure it survives when you're not here, because right now the system is you, and you deserve a backup." Phyllis looked at her. "What do you mean the system is me?" "I mean, if you were sick for 2 weeks, could someone else step in and serve your families without anything falling through?" A pause. Phyllis looked at her legal pads. "No," she said slowly. "That's what I'm fixing," Maria said. "Not you, the gap around you." Phyllis was quiet for a long moment. Then she pushed her legal pads across the table. "Start here," she said. "This is how I think about it." Maria spent 3 hours in Phyllis's office that day. She came back the following week and the week after that. By week 7, Phyllis had a digital system that she had helped design and therefore understood and trusted. And she had told Maria unprompted that it was the first time in 9 years she'd taken a vacation without calling in twice a day. That felt like something. That felt specifically like the kind of thing you did not get from a degree. In week 6, something unexpected happened. She was at Hendrix on a Thursday afternoon when a man she didn't know came through the front door and asked for her by name. Not Gerald, not Deb, her, Maria Lawson. She came out from behind the intake desk. He was middle-aged, unremarkable looking, with a press badge clipped to his jacket. Local paper. "Ms. Lawson, I'm Tom Garrett, Hendrix Courier. We're doing a piece on the Families Forward pilot program. Karen Howell at the city gave me your name as the lead coordinator." He paused. "Would you have 10 minutes? She looked at him. She thought automatically of Ray, who had been involved in all of this and whose name she had never used publicly, who had arranged things and stepped back and never sought the light. "I have 10 minutes, she said. "But I want to tell you up front, there are people who made this possible who aren't going to want to be named, and I'm going to respect that." Tom Garrett nodded, pen already moving. "That's fine. Let's start with you." She talked for 20 minutes. She talked about the intake system, the 6 sites, what the coordination model was trying to do. She talked about Hendrix, about Gerald, about the families she'd worked with. She did not mention Ray. She did not mention coins on a counter, or 59 cents, or a man in a leather vest who'd said it's the baby's right and changed the entire direction of her life. Some stories were not hers to tell. Some things you protected by silence. The article ran the following Thursday. It was on the 3rd page of the local section, not front page, not viral, not the kind of thing that shook the world. It was a quiet piece about a program coordinator named Maria Lawson, who had built a smarter intake system for 6 community centers and what that meant for the families who used them. Gerald taped it to the break room wall. Deb cried, which Deb would deny if asked. Phyllis called from the North End site and said, "You didn't mention me," in a tone that was pretending to be annoyed but wasn't. "You're behind the scenes," Maria told her, "like all the important people." She heard Phyllis laugh for the first time. Ray didn't call that week. She figured he hadn't seen it. She didn't send it to him. Then on Saturday morning, as she saw the paper, she smiled at her phone, and 3 dots, then 3rd page. "You'll do better next time." She laughed out loud in her kitchen, startling Lily, who looked at her with enormous, serious eyes from the playmat on the floor. "Your Uncle Ray," Maria told her daughter, "is the most impossible man I've ever met." Lily grabbed a plastic ring and put it in her mouth, which was her standard response to most of life's complexity. The 12-week contract ended on a Wednesday. Karen Howell called that morning before Maria had even gotten to Hendrix. "The board reviewed the pilot outcomes last night," Karen said. "Intake processing time is down 31% across all 6 sites. Duplicate registrations are down 68%. Pantry waste from over-ordering is down by half because the inventory cross-reference is actually working." Maria was quiet. "We want to make the position permanent," Karen said. "Full-time with benefits. The title would be Regional Intake Systems Coordinator." Another pause. "Maria, are you there?" "I'm here," she said. Her voice was steady. She had gotten very good at steady. Do you need time to think about it? No, she said. I don't need time. She called Gerald from the parking lot before she went inside. I have news, she said. I know, he said. Corinne called me first. She does that. He paused. I told her you'd say yes. Gerald, was I wrong? She leaned against her car in the parking lot and looked up at the sky, which was doing nothing remarkable, just being sky gray and ordinary and permanent. You weren't wrong, she said. Good, you'll still do your afternoons here. I'll always do my afternoons there. Good, he said again. She could hear the smile in it, which was notable because Gerald did not deploy smiles carelessly. Now get inside. Deb made a cake. She did not make a cake. She absolutely made a cake. Don't tell her I told you she wants it to be a surprise. She went inside. The cake was chocolate from a box mix with uneven frosting and a plastic baby figurine in the center that Deb had found in a drawer and added because she explained without any apparent self-consciousness it was symbolic. That's Lily, Deb said, pointing at the figurine. I can see that. She started everything. Maria looked at the plastic figurine. Small, generic arms raised. She thought about Lily at 7 months, exhausted and hungry, in the carrier making the small sound. She thought about the wooden animals on the mobile still turning. She thought about everything that had grown from that moment, not in spite of the desperation, but through it, the way things grow through hard ground because they have no other choice. She did, Maria said. She cut the cake herself because she was that person. Now, the person who cut the cake, who stayed late, who knew where everything was and made sure the people around her had what they needed. She had not planned to become that person. She had planned once to be a restaurant manager with a partner and a sensible life and a savings account that didn't give her nightmares. That plan had not worked out. Something else had instead. She gave the first slice to Miss Patrice, who was holding Lily in the corner, and had not yet looked up from the baby's face because some things in this world required complete attention. She gave the second slice to Deb, who accepted it with the dignity of someone who had definitely made the cake and was being politely pretending she hadn't. She was cutting the third slice when her phone buzzed. Ray. A text this time, not a call. Permanent position. City benefits. Not bad for 59 cents. She stared at the message. She typed back, how did you know it was permanent? 30 seconds. Gerald, of course. She shook her head and laughed, and the room looked at her, and she didn't explain, because some things were between her and the man in the leather vest who had started all of this with a $5 bill and 4 words. She typed, thank you. For all of it, she watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again. Then you did all of it. I just made the call. She put her phone in her pocket. She picked up her slice of cake. She walked back into the room full of people who had become improbably and completely hers, and she stayed. 6 months after she signed the permanent contract, Maria Lawson did something she had not done in over a year. She stopped being afraid of her phone. It happened gradually then, all at once, the way most real changes happen quietly beneath the surface, until the day you notice the ground has already shifted under your feet. She used to check her bank account the way a person checks a wound bracing before she looked exhaling, only when the number hadn't gotten worse. Now she checked it the way a person checks the weather. Information, something to plan around, not survive around. The number had gotten better, not dramatically, not television special better, but real life better, which is steadier and less photogenic and means infinitely more. She had 3 months of rent saved. She had Lily enrolled in the sliding scale daycare 2 blocks from the city office, a place with primary colors on the walls, and a woman named Ms. Diane who called Lily Little Professor because of the way she studied everything with absolute seriousness before deciding whether to engage. She had a health insurance card in her wallet that she touched sometimes just to confirm it was real. She had rebuilt herself from 59 cents into this, and she knew with the specific clarity of someone who has lived both sides of the line exactly how it had happened. Not luck, not a single dramatic rescue, a chain, a boy who saw something and called someone, a man who paid $5 and said 4 words, a director who moved budget lines at night, a woman who made a cake. References written at 7 in the morning and 11:53 and in the careful language of a man who owed something and wanted to pay it correctly. A chain, and she was a link in it now. That was the part that mattered most. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 6 months and 1 week after the chocolate cake with the plastic baby figurine, when Sandra Price walked into Hendricks Community Center for her standing weekly appointment and stopped at the intake desk to say something she'd been working up to for a while. Sandra looked different now. Not unrecognizably different, she was still. Sandra's still the woman who had walked in with 2 quiet children and that particular held-together posture, but there was something unlocked in the way she stood. Her kids were in the afternoon program. She'd been housed through the emergency assistance program for 4 months, had a part-time job at a school supply warehouse, and was 3 classes into a community college certificate in early childhood education. "I want to volunteer," Sandra said, "here on the intake side." She said it like she was expecting to be told no, which told Maria everything she needed to know about where Sandra still was emotionally versus where she was practically. "Okay," Maria said. Sandra blinked. "Just okay. Did you want me to make it harder? I thought you'd want references or—" "Sandra." Maria looked at her steadily. "You sat in that chair. You know exactly what it feels like to be on the other side of this desk. That's the most important qualification we've got. Everything else I can teach you." Sandra's jaw tightened in the specific way that people's jaws tighten when they're not going to cry, but it's going to be a near thing. "When do I start?" she asked. "Thursday," Maria said. "Bring your kids. We've got a room." Sandra started Thursday. Within 3 weeks, she was handling first contact intake independently with a naturalness that Maria recognized because she had felt it herself, the ease that comes not from training, but from having been the person in that chair and knowing bone deep what that person needed to hear. Maria watched her work one afternoon and felt something she didn't have a clean word for. Not pride exactly. More like recognition. The feeling of watching a pattern continue past yourself, of seeing that what you'd been given had moved through you and was now moving through someone else, and that the motion was the point. She called Ray that evening. She'd stopped tracking how often she called him. It wasn't the scheduled 4-minute check-ins of the early weeks anymore. It was just how they talked. Irregular, direct, usually short. "Sandra Price is doing intake," she said. "The woman from 3 months ago. 2 kids." "Yes." "Good." A pause. "How is she?" "She's good. She's really good." Maria paused. "She's doing what I did." She looked at someone sitting in the chair last Thursday, and she knew exactly what to say because she'd sat in it herself. Silence on Ray's end. The background rumble she'd long since identified as the garage where he worked on bikes. She could hear metal, the distant sound of someone's radio. "That's the whole thing right there," he said. "That's exactly the whole thing." "I know," she said. She told him about the chain, how she'd been thinking about it, the way it moved from Derek to him, to Gerald to her to Sandra, each link made of someone who had either received something or seen something and chosen to act on it rather than look away. "Derek's a good kid," Ray said. "He is. You should tell him that. I tell him things when they need to be said." "Ray, tell him." A pause. "He knows. He should hear it." A longer pause. She could picture him. She'd built a picture of Ray Harlan over these months. That was partly the man she'd seen at the register, and partly the person she'd come to know through his particular silences, his exact words, his refusal to be thanked. Standing in the garage phone against his ear, doing the thing he always did when she pushed past his comfortable perimeter, which was taking a half-second longer than usual to respond. "I'll tell him," he said. "Good." She heard him shift. "You talked to your mother lately?" "Last Sunday, she's coming to visit next month. She wants to meet Lily." Maria smiled at the floor. "She already bought her a stuffed elephant. Sent me a photo. It's enormous. Lily'll love it. Lily will absolutely destroy it within 48 hours. This time he did laugh. The full version, not the almost laugh. She'd earned the full version maybe 5 times in 6 months, and every time it landed like something rare. She was still smiling when they hung up. Her mother's visit was in 3 weeks. The stuffed elephant was enormous. She'd seen the photo. It was genuinely absurd, larger than Lily herself, and Maria had been to the apartment alone twice now to think about how it would feel to open that door and see her mother standing there and have nothing between them except the work of trying again. It scared her. She was going to do it anyway. 2 weeks before her mother's visit, Maria was in the city office reviewing the second quarter pilot data, when Karen Howell knocked on the open door of the small conference room she'd been using. "You have a minute, always." Karen sat across from her. She had the expression of someone who is about to say something they have thought carefully about, which made Maria set down her pen. "I want to talk to you about a new initiative," Corinne said. "Citywide, not 6 sites, 23. Every community center and satellite social services office in the metro area." She paused. "We want to expand the intake coordination model, standardize it, train it, build it into the infrastructure permanently." Maria looked at her. "You'd be directing the expansion," Corinne said. "Building the training program, supervising the site coordinators, reporting to the deputy director." She paused again. "It's a significant step up from your current role." "How significant?" Corinne told her. The salary was a number Maria would not have been able to imagine herself earning when she was standing at a grocery store register with $11.30 in coins. She sat with it. The old reflex came, the one that said, "Too much, too fast, who do you think you are? What if you get it wrong? What if the system is this kind and then takes it all back?" And she let it come, and she watched it, and she did not let it decide for her. "I want a week," she said, "to think about what the training program would need to look like. If I can sketch an outline that makes sense, then yes." Corinne looked at her. "You're not just saying yes." "I want to say yes intelligently," Maria said. "There's a difference." Corinne smiled. "Take your week." She took 5 days. She talked to Phyllis, who had become something between a colleague and a friend, and who said, characteristically, "If you don't take it, I will be personally offended, and I will tell you so directly." She talked to Gerald, who listened to her outline over the phone for 20 minutes, and then said the section on site-specific adaptation is the most important part. Don't let anyone talk you into standardizing that out. She talked to Sandra, who looked at her for a long moment and said, "Maria, you built the thing that helped me. You know how to do this." She did not call Ray until she'd decided. She called him on day 5, evening after Lily was asleep. "I'm taking the city director role," she said, a beat. 23 sites. You know about it. Gerald told me. Gerald tells you everything. Gerald and I have an understanding. A pause. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," she said. "And sure, both at the same time." "That's right," he said. "That's exactly right." "I keep thinking about the intake desk," she said. "I keep thinking about what it felt like to sit across from it versus behind it. And I don't want to get so far from that I forget what it felt like. I don't want to become someone who designs systems for people she can no longer imagine being." The silence on his end was longer than usual. "Then don't," he said. "Simple as that. You decide who you are. Nobody can make you forget where you came from." "Is that what you do?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "Every single day I decide who I am." She believed him. She believed him because she had watched him from a distance for 6 months, watched the way he moved through the world with the specific intentionality of someone who had made very deliberate choices about what kind of person to be. Not easy choices. Choices that ran against the grain of how other people read him, what they assumed when they saw the vest and the tattoos and the name. He had chosen anyway. She had chosen too. Was still choosing. "I'm going to need your reference again," she said. "Different form this time, more senior role." A pause, then dryly, "I'm going to have to update my title." She laughed. "What is your title?" "Ray," he said. "That's what I'm putting." She sent him the form that night, and he had it back to her by morning. She did not read it before she submitted it. She trusted it completely, the way you trust something that has never once been less than true. She signed the contract on a Monday morning. Karen shook her hand. The deputy director, a man named Frank Chen, who she'd met twice and who had the efficient warmth of someone who had been doing meaningful work long enough to stop performing it, said, "Gerald Marsh says you're the best thing that's happened to intake coordination in this city in 15 years. Gerald doesn't say things like that." "No," Maria said. "He doesn't." "Then we're lucky to have you." She went back to Hendricks for her afternoon shift. She would keep the afternoon shifts. She had made that clear in the contract negotiation, and Karen had agreed without pushing back because Corinne understood, or was learning to understand, that the thing that made Maria effective was exactly the thing that kept her at the intake desk on Thursday afternoons. You could not separate the two. The director who built the system and the woman who sat across from people in crisis were the same person, and that sameness was the whole point. She was at the intake desk on a Thursday, 3 weeks after she signed the director contract, when a young woman came in, maybe 25, a baby in a carrier young, maybe 5 months. The woman's hands were doing something Maria recognized immediately, a specific restless movement, the universal gesture of someone trying to calculate whether the coins they have will be enough. She wasn't counting coins. She was just standing at the entrance, looking at the room, looking at the desk with the particular expression of someone who has been outside a door for a long time and still isn't sure they're allowed to come in. Maria stood up from behind the desk. "Hi," she said. She kept her voice even warm, the way she'd learned, the way she'd been taught by her own desperation, and the way Ray's $5 had landed, and the way Gerald's "Can you come in this morning" had felt. "Come on in. Can I get you some coffee?" The young woman looked at her. Her eyes were doing the math that exhausted people's eyes do, assessing safety, assessing judgment, assessing whether this place was going to be another door that looked open and wasn't. Is this the right place?" she asked. "For help. I looked it up online, but I wasn't sure if I needed to make an appointment or—" "No appointment," Maria said. "You just need to come through the door." She moved out from behind the desk. "What's your name?" "Alicia," the young woman said. "Alicia Torres." "Alicia, I'm Maria." She gestured to the chair. "Sit down. We're going to figure out what you need, and we're going to figure out how to get it." Alicia Torres sat down. The baby in the carrier made a small sound. Maria looked at the baby, the specific look she'd learned from Gerald, not cooing, not performing, just direct and real, and said, "How old?" "5 months. Her name is Rosa." "She eating okay?" Alicia's face cracked slightly. "I had to. I couldn't. The formula. I had to." She stopped, pressed her lips together. Maria knew. She knew exactly where this sentence was going. She knew it the way you know your own handwriting, the way you know a road you have driven in the dark. She leaned forward. "It's okay," she said. "You're here now. Rosa's here. That's what matters." She held the young woman's eyes. "Her need is her right. And you showing up for her today, that's everything. That's the whole thing." Alicia Torres looked at her, something in her shoulders that locked, braced, waiting for the verdict posture began slowly to change. "What do I do?" she asked. "First," Maria said, "that we get Rosa what she needs today. Then we talk about tomorrow. And then we make a plan." She picked up a form. "One step at a time. I promise, one step at a time is enough." She started the intake. She did not think about the irony. She lived inside it instead, which is different, the difference between observing a circle and standing at its center. She had been Alicia Torres. She had sat in a chair exactly like this one, doing the math in her head, wondering if her need was too large or too shameful or too complicated for the room she was in. She had been the woman counting coins. She had been the woman in the parking lot with her forehead against the steering wheel. Now she was this, the person across the desk, the person who said, "Come in, sit down, we're going to figure it out." The person who meant it with everything she had because she had been the other person, and she knew with her whole body and her whole history that being met with humanity in the worst moment was not a luxury. It was the thing that made the next step possible. It was the hinge everything turned on. It had turned for her. She was the hinge now. She finished Alicia's intake in 40 minutes, got Rosa's formula from the pantry, connected Alicia with the housing counselor and the sliding scale clinic, and the Thursday morning new mothers group that Miss Patrice had started running 6 weeks ago with a regularity and a gentle authority that made even the most frightened women stay. When Alicia left, she looked like a different person than the one who had stood at the door calculating whether she was allowed to enter. She didn't look fixed. Nothing got fixed in 40 minutes, and Maria would never pretend otherwise. But she looked like someone who had taken a step and found ground under her foot. That was enough. That was everything. Miss Patrice appeared at Maria's elbow. She did this sometimes materialize without announcement, like a woman who had seen enough to know when her presence was needed. "Good intake," she said. "She reminded me of me," Maria said. "They all remind you of you," Miss Patrice said without judgment. "That's why you're good at this." She paused. "Rosa is beautiful." "She is. Lily's going to want to meet her when they're older." Maria smiled. "When they're older." Miss Patrice went back to the nursery. Sandra was at the second intake desk handling a new registration with the quiet efficiency she'd built over the past months. She looked up at Maria, caught her eye, gave her a small nod. The nod of one person who has been in the chair to another. The shorthand of shared experience. Maria nodded back. She sat at her desk and she looked at the room, the Center Hendricks, the place that had taken her in on a Wednesday morning, because a man in a leather vest had made a phone call, and she saw what it was. Not a building, not a program, not a line item in a city budget, though it was all of those things practically. It was a place where the chain held, where the link didn't break, where someone had always reliably been willing to look at a person in the worst moment and say, "You're here. That's enough. Let's figure out the next step." She pulled out her phone. She opened her text to Ray. She typed, "There was a woman today. Baby girl, 5 months. Couldn't afford formula. I did her intake." She sent it. She watched the 3 dots appear almost immediately. "How'd it go?" She smiled, like it was supposed to. 3 dots. A longer pause than usual. Then good. That's how it goes. She put her phone in her pocket. Outside the window, she couldn't see because she wasn't looking at it. The city went on being. The city loud and indifferent and full of people at the edges of things. People counting coins. People doing math that didn't add up. People standing outside doors wondering if they were allowed in. That was true, and it would remain true, and no intake system, no pilot program, no regional director position would make it entirely untrue. But inside this room on this afternoon, the door was open. Maria Lawson was at the desk. Sandra Price was at the next desk. Miss Patrice was in the nursery. Gerald was in his office with his glasses pushed up on his forehead, moving budget lines, making things work. And somewhere across the city, Ray Harlan was in a garage that smelled like motor oil, not thinking about any of this, not waiting for recognition, just living the way he always lived, with the specific, quiet intention of a man who had decided a long time ago who he was and never once looked back. The wooden animals on Lily's mobile at home were still turning wound each night by a mother who no longer counted days backward, who no longer measured her life in the distance to the next cliff. A boy had seen something. A man had made a call. A woman had walked through a door. The rest was everything that followed, and everything that followed was real and hard and improbable, and built from the ground up by people who had decided that someone else's need was worth stopping for. That was the whole story. That was all of it, and it was enough.